Hello, beginning drawing class. My name is Tom Chung. I run the painting program at UAA, and I also teach drawing classes, and I'm very excited to have you in my class this fall. This video is for me to go over the syllabus, and I have a slideshow of some historical and contemporary artworks to show you. And so we'll be going over that. In a following video, I'll go over the materials that I asked you to get. So let's dive into it. I'm going to go over the syllabus, and you are all welcome to email me if you have any questions from this. And always in future videos, feel free to email me if you have questions as well. So the first thing I'm going to do is go over the syllabus for the course. And so this class is taking place online asynchronously. That means that we don't have a set time that we're meeting this week. So it will be on all of you to get the work done for this class. I've been teaching this class for 6 years. And so I'm confident that this is going to be a pretty great experience if you guys put in the work. So let me see. And in the syllabus here, I talk about what we're going over in the class. And so I think I'll paraphrase this just by saying that in this course, I am focusing not only on technical skill, your ability to render something realistically or to compose an image, a strong image, but I'm also going to be pushing your conceptual thinking skills. How do you come up with an idea? How do you tell a compelling story through your art? So that's a big component of this class as well. And I think it's a pretty fun class for that reason. One thing that's essential is that enthusiasm is necessary in order for you to improve. And so I'm always open to tweak assignments. So if there's ever a homework assignment, especially that you don't feel particularly motivated about, please feel free to email me and we can come up with an alternative that's more interesting to you. My students have had some amazing successes, and the few that have not were the ones that really had a poor attitude about this. And so it's really important that you're excited and motivated, especially because it's on you to put in the time. One thing that's really important in this course is in person, we would be meeting for 5.5 hours, and you'd be expected to be putting in 5.5 hours when you do your homework assignment each week as well. And so that's now on you. I can't enforce that. And so please structure your lives in a way that lets you invest a lot of time, and you will improve relative to how much effort you put in. And so I think that in order to truly succeed, you're going to want to put in even more time than just the bare minimum that I'm asking for. And a lot of that has to do with getting excited. So in my own studio, I'm a working artist. I also teach full time. And so in order for me to stay motivated in the studio, I have to come up with ideas that are so exciting to me that I could be teaching for 6 hours straight and then come home and want to paint. So I encourage you guys to come up with ideas that interest you. And the way I run my courses is you guys can be making art about anything that you want. And it's actually encouraged, especially to be pulling from your interests outside of art. The only rule I have in terms of what you cannot be drawing in this course is just legality, that as long as what you're doing is not illegal, you are allowed to be making work about that. And so I want to make that clear as well. So those are just some general points about how I run my classes and in terms of content. So now I'm just going to go over the course structure. So each week I'm going to be posting a folder into Blackboard and also into your shared Google Drive that will have modules. Ordinarily, it's going to be 2 exercises that are posted, as well as instruction for the homework you're supposed to instruct that week, and possibly a slideshow from me or a lecture. And so every week you are responsible for watching these videos that will all be posted each Monday, and completing the assignments in your own time. I'll be available by email, so if you ever have questions or issues, we can not only chat via email, but you can also schedule a Zoom visit with me if you need to. And so we can do that. And your in my mind, you're expected to work on each exercise for about 2.5 hours or so. And then you're supposed to sort of spend 5.5 hours each week on the homework. But like I said, if you spend more, it serves you well. So in addition to the uploading of the completed assignments and the homework each week by Monday, you are also expected to provide feedback for your classmates. So when I run this course in person, we have something called a critique after each homework, which is a discussion on all of your work. And so since this is going to be online, you are all going to be giving each other feedback online. And so in addition to the exercises and the homework drawings, you'll have a week each week to add your comments to a shared document in the Google Drive folder. And so you're going to have to post responses to 3 classmates on their homework drawings from the previous week, and you'll have a week to do that. I'm going to have to make sure that everybody gets an even amount of comments. So I'll have it in clear instructions, but if you see that one artwork has, already 6 comments and there's some with none, I'm going to require you guys to leave comments on the less populated artworks until there's more even. You're always welcome to leave more than 3 comments, and I will give you extra credit for additional critique comments. So it's also important that you guys are not only leaving these comments, but you're actually reading all the other comments from each other. Even if the work being critiqued is not yours, we all still benefit from hearing the perceived strengths and weaknesses. That's the point of a critique. As an artist, we have pretty heavy blinders about what we can and cannot see about our own work. And so the function of critique is to allow an outside set of eyes to weigh in because of those blinders. So that's pretty much it for the course. The homework drawings are pretty involved. The in-class drawings are quicker. They're exercises. And then at the end of the semester, you'll have a final drawing that's 4 times larger than your ordinary homework drawing, and you'll have about a month to work on that. So that's basically the structure of this class. And so in my syllabus, I'm recommending that if you don't think that you'll be able to commit to this amount of time, which is 11 hours of work a week, as well as watching the videos that I'm posting, maybe you should drop the class, just because what I'm asking for is quite a lot. So like I mentioned before, we use the Google Drive in this class. And so you will be uploading your completed exercises and your completed homework each week to that drive. And so you'll need a Gmail or a UAA email to access this. I will also be posting guides for how to photograph your work that you need to follow. They're just basic things like don't take a photo of your work in front of your car or with your cat walking in front of it, or at a really bad angle or in terrible lighting. It's just basic things so that I can actually see what you're posting. And that's really useful too, because a lot of opportunities for artists actually happen online now. So the better you guys are at taking photographs of your work, the better off you will be in the future for professional art opportunities. So that's pretty much it. The written descriptions of the assignments will always be in the weekly folders on the drive. And just to give you an example of what some of these homeworks are, in one of them, you guys are going to have to create an imagined landscape after you learn about something called atmospheric perspective and how to create depth in a piece. My favorite assignment that I give to this class is during our identity politics unit, where I ask you guys to think of a social, cultural, or political cause and generate an artwork that comments on that. Another one of my favorites is I give random words that you have to generate a drawing based around. So that can be quite fun as well. So those are meant to stretch your creative thinking abilities, your conceptual thinking abilities, your storytelling abilities, how to make an impactful artwork, because I think that's just as important as strengthening your technical skills, as I mentioned. So I grade all of you guys on an individual basis based on what you come in with. And the biggest determining factor for your grades is really effort. As I mentioned before, the students that don't improve in my class are the ones with the poor attitude or the ones that aren't putting in the effort. And so that's the main thing I'm asking you guys to do, is to also challenge yourself that good art takes risks. And so risk taking and being ambitious with your ideas for these homeworks especially is important to succeeding in this class. And there's nothing off limits for these homework drawings. As I mentioned before, I encourage you guys to think about the funniest thing that you can think of drawing, the scariest thing. There's no more rules in art the way that it's described historically now. No more rules. So if you want to be making work that's following in the footsteps of this realist, you can. If you want to be making totally abstract work, you can. It's all valid. If you want to be bringing in content from TV shows and movies, there's no more rules about what is not art. So I think that's a great opportunity for you guys all, even in this class. So I will post another video where I go over the supplies, but just as a brief note, I've created an Amazon wish list, so it's easy for you guys to get them all. I ordered them all on this list and everything was here within a week. So I encourage you guys to order your supplies now. The drawing board that's on the list can be substituted just with clips from a stationery store and a flat piece of wood. You can also just pin your drawings to a wall that has a garbage bag behind it. I'll show you guys all this setup later, but please purchase all the supplies. It's important. Optional to the list is something called workable spray fixative, which will prevent the dust from the charcoal and the drawing material from flying around and getting really messy. So that's good. Blending stumps is also optional. It helps you push the drawing material in for detail. Charcoal pencils are optional. And painter's tape. Painter's tape allows you to make perfectly clean lines in a drawing or a painting. So you can draw against the tape and pull it up. So that's a pretty neat tool to have as well, but it is optional. I have some additional policies for you guys to read on your own in the syllabus, and I have a tentative schedule here as well. So take a look. Let me know if you guys have any questions. And so now I wanted to quickly show you some slides of work that was created in this class, just to give you an idea of what you might expect for the assignments and what other students have done. This was from an assignment where I asked for 5 stages of a dissection. So the student chose to dissect a dandelion throughout time. One of the assignments you guys are going to be getting the self-portrait through objects. And so the student chose these objects to talk about herself and her life. This was a final drawing from one of my first drawing classes. In the final drawing for this class, I asked you guys to draw an object, a figure, and an environment. Those are the 3 units of this course, and in a composition of your choosing. So this was a science student, actually, and I think some of the most interesting drawings that have come out of this class have come from students bringing in their outside interests, inspiring their artwork. There's a lot of still life drawing in this class. Drawing from life is a really important skill. You guys will get practice drawing from life and from photographs, and there's really big, important differences. When you are drawing from a photograph, these paintings, for example, behind me are from photographs, the camera makes a lot of decisions for you that if you'd had the same subject in front of you in life, you'd be seeing something slightly different. So cameras tend to lose information in very dark areas and very light areas. You have this blowout. It also tends to flatten how the images look, and can kind of suck the life out of it a little bit. One fun way I like to describe the difference between working from life and working from photos comes from my aunt, who's a Chinese brush painting master. And she told me that in Chinese brush painting, the object of the artist, the point of the painting, is to really capture the essence of the subject, basically capturing its soul. And when I'm working from a photograph, it almost feels like I'm capturing the soul of the photograph. And so the difference between looking at a real volcano and looking at a photograph of a volcano has a different kind of emotional intensity to it as well. So I like to think about that also. So I believe that it benefits you guys from working with both, because there's certain impractical aspects about working from life. Like there's no way I could have my dog continually barking while I painted him from life, for example. So that's just a note on that. In person, we have nude models for this class, and so I'll come up with an alternative for your guys's figure drawing unit. I do a lot of self-portraits because I am my cheapest and most accessible model. So we'll see. I'm sure you guys will be able to come up with a lot of creative ways to do this online with me. This is from an assignment that you guys will have coming up. It's to create an imaginary space once I teach you about something called linear perspective, which will be the exercise and demo this week. This assignment, I asked students to depict their deepest memory. This was also, I believe, the deepest memory. This was from the identity politics unit, which was to comment on a social, political, or cultural cause. So this student drew Venus with a penis to talk about transgender sort of views in culture. This was another identity politics piece. And so one note I wanted to make is you all, what's most important for me is that you all are expressing yourselves as honestly as you can. And so I don't take any of my personal beliefs into this class with me. So for example, when we do this identity politics unit, I have students that make work that's pro-life. I have students that make work that's pro-choice. And in my mind, it doesn't matter what my opinion is for any of these things. I'm here to help you guys realize your vision and your voice. And so that's what's most important to me. So I just wanted to let you guys know that. And it's also my job to moderate the discussion about your artworks. I want this to be a safe space for you guys to be able to express yourselves in any way you see fit. And so it's my job to make sure that it's in an environment that you guys can do that. So I'm asking you guys to be pretty vulnerable with your work and brave with your work. And so I'm here to help support that. So I just want to let you know. In this particular drawing, this student taxidermied a mouse, and the piece is called "If It Smells Like a Rat, Looks Like a Rat, It's a Rat." So these last few slides I have for you guys are the first drawing from the class and the last drawing of the semester, just to show you that what is possible if you really invest in this course and put in the time. The first drawing that I'm going to ask you guys to do is what these first drawings are. I asked these students to draw the most beautiful thing that they've ever seen or experienced. And then, so this student's most beautiful thing was his partner. And then I want to show you the last drawing at the end of the semester. So this was his last drawing at the end of the semester. And so for that final drawing, I just asked students to draw an object, a figure, and an environment. And so a lot of them chose to revisit the most beautiful thing, that first assignment, for their final drawing. So the student did that. So for this student's most beautiful thing drawing, it's him throwing a Pokeball and catching Mewtwo. And then for his final drawing, this is what he did. He revisited that drawing. And so in this course, I teach you guys things like value, how to see light and dark. I teach you guys how to think about depth and create the illusion of depth in your work. And really, this course is a semester of teaching you guys how to see. We live in a linguistic culture, which means that when I say the word eye, you guys are immediately going to call to mind all the nameable features that you could write down: the pupil, the eyelashes. If I asked you to draw an eye, you would draw all the nameable features unless you have experience drawing from life. This whole course is designed to break down that conditioning of seeing the world in terms of language and labeling and actually seeing something. The difference between somebody that can draw realism and somebody that can't is the person who can draw the realism can see accurately. Most of us are looking through a linguistic lens and labeling everything and actually not even seeing, say, for example, the darkness of a shadow or the way a highlight transitions to a shadow or the contour of an object as it's sitting on the ground. Is it curved? Is it flat? That's unimportant unless you're in an art class or an artist. So but you guys can see the difference once those things are pointed out. So it's really quite dramatic, the transformation that most of my students have in this course. But like I said, a lot of it is the effort that if you care about this, you'll invest more time, you'll get better. And I believe anybody can become an amazing artist. I don't believe that everybody has the amount of enthusiasm that you need to do it, but I do believe that it's within anybody's grasp. Okay. So here's another one. This is the most beautiful thing, and I believe it was a 90s supermodel, Claudia Schiffer, 90s supermodel. And then this was the students, actually this wasn't his final drawing. This was an assignment where I asked the class to draw a self-portrait as the world sees you, and then a self-portrait as you see yourself. And so this was later on in the semester, the same student, that's what he did for the double self-portrait. And then this was his final drawing, which is a little bit of a joke to where he started out in his drawing career. So yep, this is another most beautiful thing drawing. And then this was my student Ed's final drawing at the end of the class. So you can see also from these examples, everybody came in at slightly different levels, and wherever you guys come in this class is fine. With me, I'm working with you guys all individually. So those are some examples of student work from this class and some examples of the assignments and how past students have chosen to translate those or interpret those assignments. And lastly, I just wanted to do a quick slideshow of some historical and contemporary artists to show you guys how wide those doors of fine art have opened up. Art is considered pluralistic now, which, as I mentioned before, means that you can be following within any tradition you want. You can be mixing and matching different genres of art. You can be engaging in craft, and that's considered fine art. And so I just wanted to show you guys some of the diversity of work that's out there. And these are also examples of some of the art I find personally most impactful. And so let's just go through that. So I've tried to pull a lot of drawings, and drawings are everywhere. I think that it's important, if you're interested in any type of art, that you know how to draw. I am a multidisciplinary artist, so one day I'm forging metal jewelry, and the next I am weaving a tapestry, and the next I'm painting. But drawing helps me to plan for everything. Drawing helps me to troubleshoot. Drawing is the foundation of things like painting, and it's everywhere. So this is a photo of George Washington on our money, which is actually drawing. It's an etching, a drawn print, basically. And you can see here, actually, an important principle, we'll get to this, but you can see the lines here create the illusion of depth on his face because of the curvature. And so that becomes especially important when you're stylized, when you're working in something like these lines, because in an etching you can't do smooth shading like you can in a painting. So that. And people have been drawing for a very, very long time. This is an image of Shakyamuni Buddha from 1100 BCE, around then. And so you can see drawing is a global heritage of humanity, and it has really, really deep roots. I have a background in cultural anthropology, and so I like to expose you guys not only to Western art, but also art traditions that come from a variety of different cultures and geographies, just to give you a little bit more of a well-rounded idea of art. So now we're back in the West. This is Da Vinci. And Da Vinci was really interesting to me because he's not only an artist, he's also a scientist and an inventor. So a lot of his drawings and his etchings, they are from those. And so you can see he used to dissect cadavers and do sketches. He used to invent wacky flying machines and things like that. Like this looks like a coffin that's about to like shoot the body out or something. there's something about the speed of a Da Vinci drawing, the sincerity of it, that, it's not always the best choice to refine everything as tightly as you can. Sometimes a lot of impact in an artwork comes from the raw emotion and just the aesthetics. I'm mainly a storyteller in my paintings and drawings, and so it took me a long time to realize that how you draw the thing makes a huge difference in what it feels like or how powerful the artwork is. It's not just about what it is that you're drawing, it's how you draw it too. These are more Da Vinci sketches. And then I think we're moving into the Albrecht Dürer etchings and drawings. So Dürer also did a lot of great etchings. One of your guys' first lessons is going to be about value, about seeing light and dark. It's something that's really sort of neglected in our culture, but it's something that's working really well in the composition of these images, where the lightest moments are, where the darkest are. They're all just expertly crafted. You guys all have a mark making class. In an etching, like I said, there's no smooth blending. So the artist creates light and dark by various little strokes and marks. You can see there's a cross hatching going on and little dots. And the same thing that was happening in George Washington's face is happening here, which is the angle of those marks are helping support the illusion of the three-dimensional form. You can see the curved strokes around her arm helps make it look a little more cylindrical. A lot of the earliest Western art was restricted to religious themes or mythological themes. It's another Dürer. Here I have a couple Chinese landscape paintings. And one of the units, as I mentioned before, goes over atmospheric perspective, how to create depth in a piece. And one thing that's kind of interesting is that in the West, we tend to stick the viewer in one fixed spot. They're looking in one spot in one vantage point. But in the East, you actually will have a shifting of that vantage point, that sometimes the viewer is above what they're looking at. Other times they're directly in front of it, and the landscape is actually shifting in perspective. Another aspect of East Asian art that you don't see a lot in the West, especially historical Western art, is, as my aunt calls it, letting the air in, the negative space, the use of negative space in an artwork as part of the composition itself. This is a Turner drawing, so you can see, in contrast to the Eastern landscape, this is a little bit more fixed in terms of the space in this Turner drawing. So drawing functions a lot, like I said, as the foundation for other art forms. This is a painting by Ong. It's the Le Grand Odalisque, and I want to show you the gris-side. So this is the grayscale, basically drawing that he did to work out all the proportions and everything in the painting, so he didn't have to deal with the color. As you can see, drawing has a direct relationship here. What you see behind me is an underpainting that will eventually get a similar treatment of color and glaze. This is a Picasso etching of a Minotaur. You can see the concentration of marks creates more darkness in this. This is a Seurat. So in his drawing, it's created actually by the application of just tiny little dots. It's called pointillism that make up the image. Seurat was following, well, he was a little bit later than the Impressionists, but the Impressionists were interested in how vision and optics actually worked. And so Seurat's drawings were an observation that vision is not a solid field. It's actually a dappling of light, is what the Impressionists figured out by deeply investigating their own visual experience. And I do think that artists are a lot like researchers, and I find that in my own practice, my work is stronger. The more research I do, the more I know about my subject. So now we're getting to Van Gogh drawings and etchings. You can see Van Gogh uses mark in a really different way. Some of them are a little looser, some are a little tighter. These are Degas drawings. I want to show you just the beauty of how loose these strokes are, the kind of honesty that you get in drawing, the rawness of it, as opposed to sort of tighter moments. It's not always the best choice to tighten everything up and make everything the most realistic. It's an important thing to realize today, now that there's no more rules. with figure drawing, there's a precision to it, the subtleties of the human form, capturing the angle of an elbow, of a joint, the protrusion. And Degas does a wonderful job not only of capturing anatomy, but also of movement. So Francis Bacon is one of my favorite painters, and he is a great example of somebody whose work would be weaker if it was more realistic and tighter. The power in his work really is, I think, from the emotions that come through these rough textures and the roughness and the crudeness of it. He grew up in an active war zone, so there were dead bodies frequently caught in barbed wire outside of his house, and you see that influence in his work. I think he married the guy that burglared his house, or at least dated him. This is Chuck Close. Chuck Close is really interesting because he has a neurological disorder where he actually can't recognize faces, but all he paints is faces. This is an acrylic painting. And I've been in front of these in person, and you cannot tell they are not photographs even when you are directly in front of them. And what's interesting is Chuck Close is making these works. They are a reference to the photograph. A lot of artists these days just use photographs by default as a tool, but a lot of artists will use the photograph pretty self-awaredly. And Chuck Close is one of those. The diffusion of the image, the framing of it, the balance of light and dark, all of that references a photographic image. I've got some more artwork for you guys. This is Dali. I'm sure most of you guys are familiar with the melting clocks. And what's kind of neat with Dali is he's classically trained, and then so he understands things like shadow and light and perspective. And so he can imagine these really fantastical images, how the shadow would be here if the light source was coming from this direction. All of that helps make things more compelling. More Dali paintings. The perspective of this one is noteworthy, where you place the viewer, where you're looking from. This is Georgia O'Keeffe, another artist. I think her work would be weaker if it was more realistic. She's how I would describe her work as stylized. And so you can tell what it is, but there's aesthetic choices that deviate from real life. There's a simplification, there's a distortion of some of those gestures. And I think that it all adds up for quite impactful images. This is a painting by Ashley Bickerton, my favorite painter. He was working with an airbrush. He comes from a surf background, and so airbrushing was a big part of that. This is his painting, David Dog Mary. I saw it for the first time when I was 17. I grew up in New York City partially, and my art teacher took me to a collector's house, and there were just hundreds of artworks all over. There were original Picassos, and but there was this painting in the stairwell, and I remember only caring about this. And I had never seen anything like it before, and I don't think I've ever seen anything like it since. To me, it was the most disgusting thing I'd ever seen, but it was so beautiful and so undeniably sacred and connected to something spiritual that I really spent the rest of my life following that duality of the sacred and the profane. So I just wanted to pause to talk to you guys about how impactful an artwork can be in changing someone's worldview, in adding something to their experience, and helping somebody to rethink something. I oftentimes think about my classes like it's you guys with your heads inside out, and all of your artwork lets me see the contents of your mind. All right, so this is Alexander Ross. He's an interesting artist that works in little models. So he'll build clay forms. These are his drawings, but he's more well known for his paintings with the sculpted forms. Oops. But yeah, so he will sculpt little models and draw from those. These are pieces by Walton Ford. He was one of my professors when I was in grad school at Yale. And he's really interesting because this series of work is heavily inspired by the Audubon Society's sort of naturalist illustration. And what's interesting about Walton Ford's work is there's always a story behind the piece. And so this image, for example, is about India being conquered by the British, India being represented by the tiger, and the British being represented by the Yellow Jackets because India was conquered by a fleet of the British ships. And one thing about that is, the viewer might not always know these things about an artwork, but if you care about your art as the creator of it, oftentimes that translates to the viewer. What you're going to care about the most, what you think is the funniest, what you think is the most beautiful, very oftentimes is going to be what your viewer also thinks as well. And so it's also up to you guys, to let the viewer know explicitly or keep things ambiguous depending on what you think will be more impactful or important for the piece as well. So sometimes he actually has the text for you to read, other times not. So something to think about. This is the work by Julie Heffernan. She was another one of my professors. She follows in the tradition of actually the Dutch still lives. The Dutch still lives were these opulent paintings of table settings of lobsters and these huge feasts. And Julie, in the current age, is making that style figurative and bringing in ideas of climate change and excess and consumption. This is a painting by another one of my professors, Anoka Faroki, and she does really interesting work with optics. I would say she's kind of following in the tradition of the op artists that were interested in deconstructing the actual mechanisms of vision. So she paints these all by hand, but shockingly, they look like they're digitally created when they're done. They look like parabolic spaces or 3D generated spaces, but they are all hand painted. Let me show you. So this is her painting one of these pieces. She's just painting these little modules. This is, I'm blanking, one second. These are monochromatic paintings, Mark Tansey, and so he's using a single color and the addition of white and sometimes black. One thing that's really great about these pieces is the structure, the composition of them, the arrangement of the values, the space of it is all very clear. He is definitely understanding which images will translate well and which won't. In my beginning painting course, I spend the whole first day talking about Google Images and how to find a proper image to work from. So a lot of you guys might think that color is the most important thing in art. I'm really confident that it's not. A lot of artists will tell you that it's secondary to value, and I agree. So you can see in an image like this that lacks any discernible color difference, the entire image is there, everything is there, that the addition or shift of color would only marginally change this. So there's some humor in this too. I really encourage you guys to think about including all parts of your personality into your artwork. The things you find funny, the things you find beautiful, the things you find fascinating, the things that horrify you, that you lay up at night thinking about, all of that can go into your work. Vija Clemens, she's actually painting individual waves and individual spider web pieces. Jenny Saville, she's a contemporary figurative artist. This is Lee Bontecue's drawings. Lee Bonteque is more known for her sculptural canvases. I always see her work as kind of sci-fi inspired, but I'm not sure how directly interested she was in sci-fi. This drawing was actually made from car set. She held paper up to her car exhaust and then erased out parts to create the image. This is more what she's known for, these three-dimensional welded sci-fi looking canvases. This is an illustration by H.R. Geiger. He's the artist that designed the alien for the movies Aliens. He uses stencils to create these. Every artist, when you see impressive work like this, every artist has a system. Very few people are just coming up to a blank canvas or a blank piece of paper and just perfectly creating something photorealistic or as complex as this. I use Photoshop, for example, to check my work on my paintings. H.R. Geiger's using stencils. A lot of artists I know use projectors. I don't think there's anything that is cheating in art. I just think that there's better choices and worse choices for an artwork. This is paintings by Cindy Tower. So they're kind of loosely inspired by these broken down factory spaces. Drawings by Langdon Graves. So this is an artist actually using negative space, almost more like Eastern brush painting. So the negative space becomes as important as the subject. When I say negative space, it's the part that's not the subject, it's the white space. This is work by somebody I went to school with, an undergrad, Miju. She's from South Korea, and these images always seemed completely exotic and foreign to me, but apparently they come from Korean folk images. And so if you're familiar with that visual language, you might be aware of the link. She does a good job of organizing really chaotic information by simplifying the color dynamics of this. This is work by Alex Ziv, another artist that I went to school with that's working in the Bay Area. He combines a lot of different styles and is heavily influenced by things like graphic novels and skateboard design. And so you have, the pointillism, like I mentioned with Seurat and the dots, you have more graphic paint being used, cartoon language coming in. It's a good example of somebody that's combining genres, that now that there's no more rules left in art, there's a lot of fun and a lot of innovation to be made, kind of weaving together disparate things. But I encourage you guys to follow your sincere interests. You find out what's most interesting to you and follow that thread and unravel that sweater. These are all really refined images too. It's silly that it comes from Jay-Z, but there's this wonderful quote that Jay-Z has about art, the function of art, which is to elevate, refine, and transform everyday life. And I think that that's really on point for the fine arts as well. So these are collages by the artist Wengechi Mutu. So she's combining painting, drawing, and collage together. These are drawings by California artist Tom Betthauser that I went to school with. This piece is about 5 feet long. It's all graphite pencil, and he's heavily inspired by video game imagery. So you can see how lovely that translates. So these meticulously rendered images. When we were in school together, he used to drive around San Francisco and he would imagine how things would look from a 3/4 view from these above ground views and sketch. So just for a sense of scale, I think there's an image, maybe not. So his more recent work has deconstructed a little bit. This is Vincent Castiglia. These are drawn in his own blood. So I teach an experimental drawing class in the spring. We do all sorts of crazy things. I think somebody's used blood. These are drawings by Sue Ko. She is an animal rights activist artist, and I believe that 6 years of me looking at her images in these slideshows has definitely contributed to my reluctant vegetarianism. So she really plays on the viewer's emotions. She has a function and a purpose to these. Ambiguity in her work would not be the right choice. She creates these images to play on the viewer's sympathies. And to expose some of the brutalities in the agriculture industry. They're hard to look at, but that's the point of them. So this is a piece by Crystal Worrell. She's an Alaskan Tlingit artist. And so I just wanted to show you guys another example of sort of a non-Western art tradition. I think that Tlingit art is just so beautiful with the compositions and how negative space is factored in. And there's a really sort of precise way that these proportions balance. And crystal represents a really interesting kind of junction in Tlingit art where you're seeing contemporary materials coming in with traditional designs, and there's innovation happening within these art forms. And so these are some other pieces by Crystal. So I have a couple images of Huichol art from a tribe in Mexico, the peyote eating tribes, because they think about visual imagery in a completely different way than somebody trained in drawing, say, in the West. And they also think about color in a completely different way. So I enjoy showing these images to show you an example of a non-Western culture and how they're thinking about form and color and line and all that. These are watercolors by Conrad Ruiz, American artist. This is the largest watercolor in the world, I believe. Using repetition here for impact. I think a piece like this is I enjoy seeing kind of the everyday influences coming in and being sort of elevated in a piece like this. The video game influences, the action movies, but obviously that's kind of my gig too. Got James Jean. James Jean actually worked for, I believe, Marvel Comics, working for them, but he's also a fine artist and street artist. And I think he does a really great job at innovating, crafting images that I've never seen before and nothing like it, really. There's also a certain refinement that happens in James Jean's work that I really appreciate. Not all people think that art needs to impress a viewer anymore. I think it does. I like my art to tap dance for a viewer. There are some that believe that art could be sort of read about and conceptualized, but I appreciate art that is tap dancing and trying to impress me. There's many ways you can impress a viewer too. You don't need to just use realism, just color choices can impress a viewer, just composition, even the storytelling can be strong enough to carry something and hold impact. This is work by Kara Walker. She's an American artist, and she uses the visual language of the silhouettes to make a connection between the America's sort of racist history and present. And what's interesting is the images are so graphic and brutal that it's clever that her silhouettes kind of take the edge off a little bit. There's a thing called the sucker punch. Well, I call it the sucker punch in art. Where you give the impression of something with an artwork, and then as the viewer spends a little bit more time, they're like, ooh, oh, maybe it's not that. Something like this seems kind of fun, and then you spend 2 seconds looking at it, and you're kind of punched in the stomach. So I think she does a great job at that. I think she's a really brave artist. I want all of you guys to think about the kind of work that's going to mean the most to you, that would mean the most to your viewers, because, why bother with anything else? She's a controversial artist, even within the Black community, outside of it. But I appreciate her bravery and all of the work that she does. And the research that goes behind it too. This is one of my favorite artworks ever, and it's by Kara Walker, and she was in charge of doing an installation at the Domino Sugar Plantation. And so she created this giant sphinx made out of sugar, and she created these little children made out of molasses. And to me, it just talks about the psychological immensity of racism. And there's just a real impact and ballsiness and power in a piece like this, I think. This is Sharina Shah, and I just wanted to throw these in to show you that drawing can come into play in more innovative ways. So she's actually drawing and doing calligraphy over photographs. So it's just a really inventive way to bring drawing into another medium. The one thing in common with all of the artists I showed you in the slideshow, and also personally in my own practice, is I believe how much they cared about their work. The investment of the artist, what their work meant to them, and how ambitious they are with it. And so that's what I want all of you guys to attempt to do as well. I want you to make the work that means the most to you. So your first assignment is to think of the most beautiful thing that you've ever seen or experienced and attempt to translate that into a drawing. So I benchmark just to see where you're at with your conceptual thinking skills and technical skills. So if your materials have come in, feel free to fiddle around with them and use the materials for the class. If your materials have not arrived yet, just try to make a drawing with whatever you have. But this is going to be a way for me to get to know you as well. So that is your first assignment.